All right, so Marissa, you are with fightbackmarxist.ca.
Yes.
That's a pretty bold name right there. Can we get that in there, Savannah? Here, let me just pull this down a little. Oh, you had it in your pocket.
I did.
So this is your sign.
Yep.
Bring down Doug Ford.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. I love the Donkey Kong reference. He's also got laser eyes. That's pretty sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're very, very intimidating. All right. Marissa, tell us a little bit about Fight Back.
Yeah, so we are a grassroots organizations of students and workers, both unionized, non-unionized. We're a Marxist organization. We believe in militant tactics in the labor movement and socialist demands. We believe that all the problems that we're facing as a society, whether it's like healthcare cuts, racism, sexism, all comes back to the crisis of capitalism. And if we're going to solve any of these, we need to tackle capitalism itself. And yeah.
All right, so that's a very interesting and bold stance.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how capitalism is the root of racism and sexism.
Well, it comes down to, first of all, sexism actually goes back to the start of class society in general. It does predate capitalism, but there is an economic imperative to it. When you have private property and you want to keep it in the family, then you need to control who women have sex with, so you know who's father of whom. And that's what it comes down to. And then, when your children are your workforce and you need to have control over them, that's another reason for wanting to, control sexuality and to control your children in the home. And then all of the unpaid labor that women do in the home to regenerate the workforce, has great benefits to capitalism as well as all these different prejudices are very useful for setting different layers of the working class against one another, so which makes it harder for the working class to come together to fight against a class enemy, which is the capitalists. And then when it comes to racism, the racism that we know today, which is largely based around like anti-black racism, although there are all different kinds of iterations. The beginning of that was with the beginning of chattel slavery in the U.S. and the production of cotton and the need to have a cheap workforce that was easily identifiable and tied to the land. And you actually saw the development of race science to justify having black people as slaves. That is where that started from. Before that, there were instances of white indentured servants, uniting with black slaves in rebellions. But then the slave owners started to give more privileges to the white indentured servants to try to separate them. And that really is at the basis of the development of capitalism as well, with Industrial Revolution, textile industry, cotton, and all of that. And of course, that's a very simplistic explanation of it, but that's kind of the beginning. And again, you have these super exploitable layers of the working class who you can make excuses to pay less. You can say, oh no, it's not the bosses that are the problem, it's the immigrants that are the problem, or it's black people who are the problem. And then you divide people against each other and kind of distract them from what the actual problem is.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, the gender thing, this makes a lot of sense to me because, how do you get people to go to work every day? Well, you tell them that they need it because they need to accrue money, they need to accrue wealth. Well, what are you going to do with wealth after you die? You need to do something with it. It can't come with you. Oh, well, you'll pass it to your children. Okay, well, how can you make sure the children are yours? Well, you control women's sexuality. That way you know exactly who they're sleeping with. So you can say, okay, this is my child, therefore my wealth will go to them. But really it all comes, like what you're saying, and it frankly makes sense to me, is that it started all from just developing a need for accruing wealth by saying, oh, well, where's your wealth going to go? Okay, don't worry. She's your wife. She won't have sex with anyone else. So now you have a reason to work for us. And it's to make money that you can give to your children, which you know will be your children. By the way, woman, you better stay in the home, and if you commit adultery, we're going to throw rocks at you until you die. If a man does, well, that's fine, because he's just dividing his wealth, right? So yeah, so that's very interesting. I also I think that's very interesting about the racism part, because I know that when I was learning about East India and their culture and history, I learned about their class system where, depending on where and how you were born, you know, you could go anywhere from, well, you're born as a social outcast and you will die a social outcast and you will have nothing, to, oh, yeah, sorry, were you born as a priest? Okay, well, here, you're set up for life. And it was so surreal to see such a level of division among people into these castes, just so that they could be controlled. So what you're saying is that if somebody is subscribing to racism, they're allowing themselves to be controlled. I think it's very telling that white slaves and black slaves would ally together against rich slave owners until the rich slave owners said, well, how are we going to take away their power? Oh, we'll just divide them. Hey, white people, black people, you hate each other now. Oh, great, nobody's rebelling anymore. They're just lynching black people. Amazing. Yeah, so that's quite telling. I definitely see where you're coming from on this. So you feel that this all boils down to capitalism, and you're saying that it was the capitalists who were behind this. Who are these mysterious the capitalists?
Well, yeah, it's the capitalist class. That's the ones who own and have control over the banks and the means of production. That is the factories, mining, telecommunications, transportation. And it is the capitalists as a class. They have their class interests. So like throughout history, you might have people rise into the capitalist class, or you might have a capitalist or a small capitalist like fall into another class, but there's a class interest at play, and that it is their intent to protect their class interest because they own everything. They are the ones who get to profit off of it. The labor of the workers. So it's in their interest to preserve that,
So the really rich people who own things, basically. Yeah. My question, people who own things.
Not just things, the means of production,
People who own the rights to other people's work, basically. Interesting, so under this theory of capitalism being behind everything, what is motivating the capital-owning class? The people who are fleecing the working class and sowing hatred and discord and misogyny and racism just to be able to keep working class people down. By the way, if you subscribe to racism, you're putting yourself down. You're allowing yourself to be controlled. Don't get controlled. Love everybody. Anyway, that was a brief aside. So what's motivating them? Why are they doing this?
It's profit.
But why? What? How can profit be such a motivator? Hey, I made an extra 10 grand this year. I'm still gonna have the same 3 yachts. Why does that motivate them?
It's the logic of the system itself. I mean, you do see Jeff Bezos, Tesla guy, what's his name, Elon Musk, they do have billions and billions of dollars that they aren't putting to use. They are just sitting on them, on that money. I think it's something like 8 individuals in the world have as much as the bottom 50% in the world. So, I mean, you could...
8 people, as much as half the world. What is the world, 6 billion, 60 billion?
7 billion, I think.
7 billion, okay. So 3.5 billion humans have as much cumulative wealth as these 8 people.
As the top 8, so, I mean, you could dissect their psychology as much as you want. I don't actually...
I think we should. Let's get them on the show. Hey guys, rich people, we want to interview you.
Yeah, but that's not really the point. The point is that capitalism has a logic of its own, that it's driven by profit. Things move forward or are held back by profit. Originally, competition, the profit motive did drive innovation, it did drive competition, but after a certain point, when there's competition, someone wins and someone gets bigger, and it's the logic of capitalism itself. So now the profit motive holds development back when we live in an age of monopoly capitalism, and there's no going back to the early days. You hear that sometimes from Bernie Sanders types. There's no going back to original capitalism or whatever, because this is the logic of how it works. It will always end up at this point. And so now you see mega corporations making deals with one another so they don't have to innovate. They buy patents up and sit on them. It's all driven by the logic of profit itself. And what we need to do is have the workers take control of the economy so that the system is run for need instead of profit.
Interesting.
Yes.
I mean, I think the biggest plus point that I hear for capitalism is that it inspires all of this innovation. And you're saying that because the people who actually get, and it makes sense to me because, you know, working in film, the movies that get seen aren't necessarily the best movies. They're the movies that have a marketing budget so that people know about them and watch them. So taking that logic to the rest of capitalism, it kind of makes sense that the people who are successfully making money aren't necessarily the innovators. They're the ones with a marketing budget and that can sell humans on what they're doing, even if it's not that great. I mean, we've seen electric cars be invented and then quashed by car companies, and then be invented again and then quashed by car companies. And that is directly the capitalist money system of ownership quashing innovation. Wow, okay, interesting. Marissa, this is some fascinating stuff. So this system, and you've talked about this a little bit, but this system where the capitalist people who own the labor of others class are keeping the other classes down through dividing them with racism and misogyny and quashing innovation with their money. Aside from violent revolution, which I'd like to avoid, what's the solution? What can the average person do to make Canada a better place?
Yeah, well, the solution is revolution, but a lot of people have this idea that revolution means taking up guns and shooting people. Revolution is transformation in social relations. So you can have you can have a revolution.
That sounds much nicer.
You can have a revolution that takes place peacefully if people are organized and act decisively enough. What a revolution would be the working class taking control of society, of the means of production for themselves. And the way that would happen would be like through a general strike, through some kind of like mass movement that takes place. For example, when there have been general strikes in the past that have gone on for a while, that have had a deal of success, what happens is they shut society down. And then it's not the capitalists who are running things anymore. It's the strike committee and the democratic will of the workers in the streets. And then that poses a question, who really runs society? And that is then the first step into taking control of society in itself. Factory occupations, workers' councils, things like this. When they get violent is when the capitalists try to use the police or the army to put that down.
Ah, that's why revolutions get violent, is the, you know, oh, well, racism and misogyny didn't work to keep the workers down. Let's bring in the police and shoot them.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. And I'm hearing that in Sudan, that is what was happening recently, and then they had to have a violent revolution. It had to be violent because when they protested passively in the streets, they were getting shot.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. So right now, the people who own other people's labor and through money are running society with the government as puppets, or where does the government sit in all this?
I mean, it's not like puppets. I mean, no,
Good.
Yeah, no, they are part of the same class and they have the same interests. I mean, you look at who's in government. I mean, like Ford is a capitalist.
A capitalist as in someone who believes capitalism is good, or as in someone who is part of the class that owns other people?
Someone who is part of this class. I mean, like, they go to this. Yeah, they go to the same universities, they go to the same clubs, they hang out in the same circles, they have the same friends, they have the same economic interests.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
What if we could change the mind? Sorry, that guy loved my outfit. What if we could change the minds of the average capitalist and sort of convince them that there's more to life than owning the labor of others?
I mean, it's not so much about individual psychology. It is about they have a class interest. The profit motive itself has its own logic. You can have individual capitalists who try to have like best practices, etc. That doesn't change the system as a whole, and then they have to compete against other capitalists who don't have the same scruples as them, and they will be driven out of business. So that's a problem. The system itself has its own logic.
Interesting. All right, well listen, Marissa, I have taken a lot of your time today. Thank you so much. Ideally, I'd love to have you again sometime that your group is in Kitchener and talk a bit more about understanding the logic of the capitalist system so that we can understand the inner workings for those of us who watch the show and want to change it from the inside. But in the meantime, Marissa, you've been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your theories, your insights, everything.
And yeah, no, if you do want to learn more, you can check out Marxist.ca. Marxist.ca. Exactly.
All right, good. Marissa, thank you so much for being on Canadian Love.
Thank you.